Si hay un mercado protagonista en estos momentos es el mercado de divisas. Mientras el euro sigue repuntando fuerte frente al dólar, Japón advierte de una nueva intervención en el yen. ¿Estamos ante una guerra de divisas? Se lo vamos a preguntar hoy a Ashraf Laidi, que es director de estrategia de mercados de CMC Markets en Londres. Muy buenos días. ¿Cómo está? Ashraf, recordar que ayer estuvo dando una conferencia en el Hotel Palace de Madrid sobre el mercado de divisas y el próximo martes le veremos en Barcelona, ¿verdad? Cuéntenos, ¿qué tal fue la experiencia?
Yes. Yesterday was a nice presentation with a great showing and by over 200 people in Madrid. We spoke about the currency markets. We spoke about the central banks. Everybody's asking questions. How much further will the U.S. Central Bank be able to inject liquidity? How will the rest of the central banks be able to cope with their currencies? And we also spoke about the relationships between currencies and the various commodities, oil, gold, the silver, and we also touched upon the equity indices. So we tried to, it was supposed to be 2 hours, but it lasted for 3 hours and a half, and at the Western Palace in Madrid, and we think, and we actually received a lot of very good questions from the audience. So I'm really looking forward to our next event in Barcelona, Tuesday the 19th at the Condés Hotel. It's going to be at 6:30 p.m. at the Condés at Barcelona on Tuesday the 19th, and we're going to be talking about these topics too.
Por lo tanto, vamos a profundizar en el mercado de divisas. Parece que hay una guerra en este mercado y el Fondo Monetario Internacional ha anunciado de que si los gobiernos siguen manipulando el tipo de cambio, pueden tener bastantes efectos negativos, ¿no? ¿Qué opina al respecto?
Yes, people talk about this as a currency war. Just because various countries are trying to prevent their currencies from rising, and but this is really all starting from not only the People's Bank of China that is keeping its currency weak, but really the main driver is the Federal Reserve that is now expected to start a new wave of quantitative easing, which is basically injecting liquidity, which means it's going to buy approximately between 100 billion and 200 billion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds every month. And basically, that is going to make things very hard that is going to drive the dollar weaker and weaker. And if we do not see a weakness or a deterioration in the UK or in or in Europe, if this will leave the U.S. dollar continuing to fall against the yen, and against all the Latin American countries, against the Asian currencies that have little choice but to try to do what? They have to try to prevent their currencies from strengthening, because the Federal Reserve is engaging now in a policy of exporting disinflation or exporting deflation. And it leaves very little choice for these countries. But I do think that the biggest risk that we can call this a currency war, if the United States is able to pass protectionist laws in Congress, okay, such as the 27.5% import tariffs on Chinese imports. If in the improbable event that it manages to pass that law, then that would be called a currency war, because China will not accept that and will not take it in silence. So I think that we can, there's maybe currency skirmishes. It's not really a war until we see that happening, and I do not expect that law to be passed.
Precisamente, como comentaba, tanto desde Europa como Estados Unidos piden al gobierno chino que revalúe su divisa, el yuan, porque está excesivamente bajo y está afectando bastante a las exportaciones de ambas regiones. Mientras tanto, tenemos a Japón, que amenaza con una nueva intervención en su divisa, en el yen. ¿A qué nos podemos enfrentar?
Okay, let's start with the second part of your question, which is Japan, which is Japan. The intervention, the intervention by the Bank of Japan, which is the first one since 2004, is sort of historic in many ways. But the reason that the yen continues to strengthen, and the reason that we expect it to continue to strengthen, and any weakness in the yen is going to be temporary, because the Bank of Japan said that it's going to use no more than 5 trillion yen worth of basically money allocated for intervention, or not intervention, but continued easing. And with that, that is really 5 trillion yen is the equivalent of no more than 65 billion US dollars. 65 billion US dollars is much smaller than what the minimum amount, small amount, or the low end of the starting amount of the purchases of US Treasuries by the Fed, which is around 100 billion. So the Fed is expected to start with a much bigger amount. This means that the impact is going to be, the downward impact on the US dollar is expected to be more than the downward impact on the Japanese yen by the Bank of Japan. And therefore, Japan has to really start to buy probably stocks like it did in 2002. And as for China, yeah, China is engaging in some sort of intervention. We think that China will have to probably raise interest rates, increase interest rates, tighten a monetary policy, and that will probably lead to a gradual rally, or a gradual increase in the yuan. And actually, I want to show a chart here. Basically, this is the Chinese yuan versus the yen, and it's a weekly chart. And as you can see, the all-time highs here in the Chinese yuan, here's were around 2008, and you can see that since 2008, it has fallen from over 16 yen to all the way to around 12. So it has fallen around 25%. So the yuan is weakening definitely against the yen. The yen is strengthening against the yuan and against many other currencies. And I really think that there's a chance that we're going to test here below the 12 level. And the only way to reverse this, well, actually there are two major ways, will not only be aggressive intervention by the Bank of Japan, but it will have to be some sort of tightening of monetary policy by China, which will sort of help the yuan a little bit. And I think that otherwise, if we continue to see this weakening, there will be a problem, because we have to remember that China is also buying Japanese government bonds as part of the process to transfer some of its reserves from the US dollar. And that is really what is mainly driving the Japanese yen higher against the yuan.
Ashraf, y en este escenario estamos viendo cómo repunta fuertemente el euro frente al dólar, supera 1,41 dólares. No sé si son niveles sostenibles para el euro o si podremos llevar a cabo alguna estrategia.
Yeah, well, we have really crossed above key levels. We crossed above the 200 in the euro dollar. We crossed above the 200-day moving average. We crossed above the 200-week moving average. We crossed above key levels that I'm going to show here in the chart. So if you're going to look at the euro dollar here, and this is a weekly chart, and basically this is from the high of this is really the all-time high around 160. And just to give you an idea, we basically recovered. Well, we came down, then we went higher here. This is when the Federal Reserve was injecting liquidity in 2009. The stock markets pushed higher in 2009, and the euro pushed higher. And then the euro started to come down here. If you remember the problems of Europe and Greece in late 2009, early 10, the euro fell. And here is what happened. Now here we have not only broken above the 200-week moving average, but if you take the retracement, if you do the retracement, the Fibonacci retracement here, I'm using the charts of CMC markets here, and if you do the retracement from here to here, you will see that basically what we have broken above the key, the 139. You see, this is very important. This level, the red line, is a 200-week moving average, which coincides with the Fibonacci retracement of 139, 61.8, and we broke above this. So right now, there is some room of some resistance around these lows, which is, I would say, just around 141. What we have to be careful about this chart is that if we look at the stochastics, if you look at the slow stochastics here, which is a measure of the momentum, we could be looking here at a potential negative or bearish divergence. The stochastics weekly or slow stochastics are pointing lower, while the euro here is trying to push higher. So we have to be careful about a potential decline. However, I would not be worried. I would not be worried about the euro declining until we fall below this level. And this is what I'm going to show right now. And this is a very important level. From September the 10th, if you draw a trend line, guess what? This week, we touched below the trend line. We touched below it, but we never broke. So we have to be careful. So the euro respects the technicals. So as long as we are really above as long as we close this week and next week really above 140, we are really in good health. But I think that we would only be worried about the longs in the euro above 136. So basically, right now, I think the euro is in good shape. If I were to make a trade right now, I would probably go in, and I would probably put in a buy order just at 140. But I'll put a good stop here below around 130, 39, 20, 39, 30, and I'll be looking for a move at around 141.80.
Nos ha analizado cómo es el comportamiento del mercado de divisas. Si le parece, nos centraremos en las consecuencias que puede tener en el mercado de commodities o materias primas, pero si le parece, será nuestro siguiente bloque.